But perhaps the grandest star of the era was the automobile. Nothing in the 20s revolutionized the lifestyle of Americans more than the incredible motor car. Henry Ford's development of the assembly line boosted both employment and wages and set off the modern American Industrial Revolution. Everywhere, more and more people went to work in factories, turning out products by the hundreds of millions. But somewhere along the assembly line, the workers often got lost in the rush of production. Considered an extension of the machinery, the industrial man was often less important than his output. Working conditions were difficult, supervision usually autocratic, and benefits non-existent for most workers. In sweatshops and even in better factories, it was production that mattered. At Western Electric's Hawthorne Works in Chicago in the 1920s, telephone equipment was being manufactured by 40,000 people. What Hawthorne employees had received their company-paid pension plan back in 1906. They had vacations 1 week after 5 years, and they had sickness disability pay. Hawthorne was considered a progressive place to work.
Those who worked at Hawthorne really respected in the neighborhoods.
It was considered quite a privilege to be working here.
At this and 3 other companies in 1924, the National Academy of Science began an experiment to determine how illumination affects worker efficiency. The premise was that output would improve if the lighting of work areas was improved. Something very curious happened when new experimental lights were installed. Output went up among those employees being studied, and also among those whose lighting had not been changed. And most puzzling of all, it continued to go up even when lights were turned down. Having proved nothing, these studies were called off by the National Academy. It might all have ended there.
Good there, Dan. Looks like a good cigar, too.
Oh, that's a dandy.
Oh, that's...
We're talking about the 20s.
Oh, the 20s.
Oh, that's a long time.
That's in another era.
Yeah,
Here's a picture.
Yeah, that's the test room there.
Let's open it to that, because that's the test room group.
Now, that is the heart of the study.
Chip, where were you then?
I was over in this direction, in front of the girls.
What position did you have, Teresa?
I'm the one in the middle, the blonde there.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
The chute. Can you see the chute on there?
Here.
Oh, here you
There's
are.
our picture.
There's the chute. I remember when they dropped.
Relay making was picked for a new experiment when Western Electric alone decided to probe the inconclusive results of the illumination studies. 6 young women assembled the electromagnetic switches while rest breaks and different hours were tried. It was the core of what would later be called the Hawthorne Studies, industry's first scientific inquiry into employee attitudes. Continuing changes in routine were freely discussed with the workers, whose output as well as involvement in the project increased dramatically. Each completed relay was counted by a tireless tape, which recorded an overall production increase of 30%. In this small room for more than 5 years, observers studied workers producing more in less time than ever before. Industrial history was in the making. Earlier, Hawthorne's George Pennock brought the Harvard Business School into the studies. Associate Dean George Lombard.
Harvard became connected with the Hawthorne Studies soon after Mr. Pennock had heard Elton Mayo give a talk in New York. Mayo was interested at the time in topics of fatigue and monotony, and Mr. Pennock thought that some of the ideas that Mayo expressed might be of some interest in connection with the Hawthorne Studies. So he asked Mayo to come out to the Hawthorne plant, and then began a long series of associations between our 2 institutions.
The Hawthorne-Harvard cooperative inquiry continued into the 30s, delving into production areas all over the plant. When the early returns from the relay room began to be understood, the investigators felt the attitudes of other workers ought to be explored. They began industry's first formal employee interviewing program. Some 20,000 Hawthorne people aired their feelings. about their jobs, their supervisors, their working conditions, about anything and everything. In other experiments, investigators found the first clues to the social organization of people at work, an organization that seemed to have as much or even more impact on output than anything management did. Though not all the results were as dramatic as the relay room, in general, output increased wherever these tests were tried. The investigators found industry had never tapped the workers' real worth and sent the massive proof back to Harvard for compilation.